So, Kill la Kill had a manga adaptation and it's not that good. The manga ran for 17 chapters and was collected into 3 volumes, and even though it was just 3 volumes long, reading it felt like an eternity. I think the biggest problem with the manga is that it's just a worse version of the anime in basically every way. The manga just doesn't capture what makes the anime fantastic. Most of my issues with the manga are about the artwork, so let's just start with that. The biggest problem with the artwork is just how boring it looks most of the time. The one big reason for this is how the artist Akizuki utilizes motion lines in the manga. When the backgrounds aren't either white or grey, there are just simple motion lines as backgrounds. Motion lines are supposed to enhance the movement in the panels, and the use of motion lines here just doesn't do that. The lines feel like they are like a separate thing from the characters, even though they should feel like they are part of the characters and the environment to fulfill their purpose. The implementation of the lines also feels very amateurish. There are only like 3 ways how the lines are used. There are horizontal lines, vertical lines, and lines that just point to a random character. It feels like the artist just learned how to use motion lines and didn't think to do any experimentation with them. I think that the bad use of motion lines is a pretty big flaw to the series, because Kill la Kill is known for its energetic and insane fights that are brought to life by the fantastic animation and art, but the manga just can't keep up at all. I want to actually give an example of motion lines used quite well in an over-the-top action series to create an intense fight scene. I'm going to talk about the Deku vs Muscular fight scene in My Hero Academia. This fight does also have motion lines used as backgrounds, but on top of that they are blended with the characters and the punches. These motion lines are essential to making the fight scene feel as intense as it should. There are many other problems with the art in Kill la Kill, but I want to talk a bit about comparing the anime and the manga. Some people might complain that I shouldn't expect the level of intensity from the manga because it's just a manga and it couldn't have fights as good as the anime. I could kinda agree with this because the anime has fight scenes that are done just so perfectly, but I don't agree that manga fight scenes couldn't be as intense as their anime counterparts. For example, I actually think that the aforementioned fight from My Hero Academia is actually better in manga form, even though the anime has sound and animation on its side. It just boils down to talent and using the strengths of the medium, and with the Kill la Kill manga there is a lack of both of these. One other big problem is the portrayal of the villain characters and the school. In the anime and the overall story, the villain characters at the school have this huge presence that is totally gone in the manga. The presence that is present in the anime is not just coming from the storytelling, it's also from the presentation, and the presentation in the manga isn't as great. Just comparing shots from the anime and the panels from the manga shows that the shots in the anime display the intensity and the power much better. There are also many other choices that decrease the presence in the manga. One thing is how they show the school for the first time in each version. In the manga it's shown for the first time in the first panel after the color pages, and the panel doesn't give it any importance or make it seem any powerful. On the other hand, in the anime the school is shown in this crazy cut where a student flies through the schoolyard, and the cut totally sells the viewer on the scale of the school. Another things include removing the blinding light of the school, except for one small mention, and not giving Satsuki's introduction even a big panel. I also want to show a panel from Gamagori's first battle. In this fight, Gamagori is supposed to seem unstoppably powerful and commanding, but then there are panels like this that just make him look small and stupid. The artwork in the manga can sometimes just be confusing to look at. The battle scenes can be way too crowded and there are way too many sound effect descriptions in the panels. The manga also uses a technique where a character can sometimes be overlaid on many panels at the same time. Sometimes it can work in favor of the manga to make it more dynamic, but most of the time it's just confusing and it doesn't add anything. And now we can get into the story, and there are also some pretty big problems with the story. The most obvious one is that the manga just doesn't have the whole story like the anime, as it only covers the first half of the anime. The first half of Kill la Kill has a ton of setup for the second half of the story, like the nudist beach, New Harime, the Tri-City School Raid, Ryoko's Berserk Mode, and the Life Fibers, for example. As just a story, I don't think the first half alone holds up that well, but if the anime had ended at the halfway point, I think I still could love it just for the presentation. The manga doesn't have this advantage, and it just feels unsatisfying in terms of the story. There are also some story differences in the manga, mostly consisting of cut content. Episode 4 is basically cut for a joke where Ryoko stared at the school on the no late day. This episode could be considered kind of fillerish, but when the manga doesn't even have an overall satisfying story, I think it would have been okay to adapt this episode properly. I very much liked the episode, so it was just kinda lame seeing that it wasn't in the manga. Episodes 6 and 8 are also mostly cut, and this is kind of a big problem because these episodes give characterization and show the power of the Elite Four. With these episodes gone and all of their backstories cut, the Elite Four feel like just any old disposable villains in the manga. And it's even worse because they are almost like the final bosses in the manga. Also, the Elite Four fights go by way too fast, so they don't even feel like a threat at all. Another very rushed moment is when Ryoko goes berserk. In the manga there is basically no fight with Ryoko in the berserk mode, and they just keep telling how dangerous she is without showing anything before Mako comes to rescue. In the anime there is at least some fighting and chaos that Ryoko creates. After that the manga just basically teases what's gonna happen and then it just ends. Overall the manga just isn't worth it. It has some okay things in it, like the battle between Ryoko and Satsuki is kind of okay, and they do somewhat capture at least some of the manic energy of Mako, but everything that is in the manga is done just so much better in the anime, and I highly recommend the anime. It's fantastic and takes full advantage of the medium of animation to create like the best possible anime. The manga doesn't take advantage of anything really.